Hare Krishna. So we are on the Arsa-Prayoga.com website again. This is a post from 2014, which I wrote as a response to Dravida Prabhu's so-called defense of the book changes. Here we have a picture of Dravida Prabhu. This is a response to Dravida Prabhu's article, The Book Changes, a Defense, posted on the Sampradaya Sun in 2014. January 2014, actually. Basically, Dravida Prabhu's attempted defense boils down to two well-known fallacious arguments, often presented by the BBT International. 1. Prabhupada trusted Advaita Swami pre-November 14th, 77. Therefore, the editing Advaita Swami has done after Prabhupada's disappearance, post-November 14th, 77, is also approved. And 2. The books are made quote-unquote closer to Prabhupada by making them closer to the so-called original manuscript, which is really only a draft. Let us look at each of these fallacious arguments. The "he is good" argument. I have posted an article on my blog defeating this fallacious argument, so often presented by the BBT International. Is Advaita still good? BBT International and their supporters often attempt to justify the changes made to Prabhupada's books by Advaita Swami by pointing out that Prabhupada a couple of times spoke highly of his editing work. This article will show that these statements by Prabhupada can be construed to mean that Advaita Swami's editing work after Prabhupada's disappearance is pleasing to Prabhupada. From BBT International's website, quote, of course, regarding Advaita Swami, the BBT's chief editor, Srila Prabhupada, wrote, quote, concerning the editing of Dravida Prabhu, whatever he does is approved by me. I have confidence in him, unquote. And this was a letter to Radha Vallabha, 7th September 76. BBT International and the supporters often speak about this quote from Prabhupada as if it was some kind of blessing from Prabhupada that makes Advaita Swami and his editing infallible even to this very day. This, of course, makes no sense, and even Advaita Swami himself admits that he sometimes commits mistakes in his editing. One example of this is his changing Vishnu form into the Vishnu platform. This is from bhagavad-gita 261 and the purport, actually. And here Advaita Swami admits that he actually made a mistake. So it's obvious that we can't take the statement, whatever he does is approved by me, too literal. In order to be continuously approved by Prabhupada, Advaita Swami need to continuously meet certain criteria set forth by Prabhupada and Shastra in regard to editing protocol. If it can be argued in any way that the editing policy of BBT International compromises the transcendental potency of Prabhupada's books, or if Advaita Swami becomes an atheist or a Mayavadi or falls down, or if he somehow goes against the direct instructions of Prabhupada in his editing process, then we must conclude that his editing is unauthorized and must be stopped. He can then no longer be approved. This blog and several other websites have for years been showing that there is no evidence to support even the slightest change in Prabhupada's books. It has been shown how Advaita Swami does not at all perform his editing work according to the accepted protocol set forth by Prabhupada, who said no changes. Shastra, Arsa-Prayoga, the Arsa-Prayoga principle. So both Prabhupada and Shastra talks against changing Srila Prabhupada's books. And even academic scholars, they do not like that changes are made to books, because then they are not authentic. I mean, we're talking about posthumous changes, of course, and especially on Srila Prabhupada's books where it is not mentioned that these changes have been made and where no one can see which changes have been made. We are shown how he's actually sabotaging the books, however well-intentioned he may be. So even though Prabhupada spoke highly of Advaita Swami's editing 40 years ago, it does not make Advaita Swami infallible, and it does not mean that he can just do whatever he likes to Prabhupada's books. The other quote that BBT International and their supporters often refer to is this from BBT International's website. Quote, and in the conversation where Prabhupada complained so strongly about rascal editors, Srila Prabhupada said about Jadwaita, he's good. Unquote. End quote. So 40 years ago, Prabhupada said about Jadwaita Swami that he was good. Does it then follow logically or experientially that he is still good? Obviously not. There are several examples of Prabhupada at one point praising some of his disciples and then at a later point criticized them severely. Prahlad Nishinga Prabhu has written a very nice article about this, published on bookchanges.com. You can see that here. If you want to read it, you can go follow the link here. If you go to Arsa-Prayoga.com and find this article, you can follow the link. But Prahlad Nishinga Prabhu says, quote, just because Srila Prabhupada at one point said someone was a good man, does it mean that they are one now? Srila Prabhupada liked many devotees at one point, and at that point put them in positions of power and authority and praised them. But later on down the road, he changed his opinion about them, and or they went astray or deviated to one degree or another. So although at one point Prabhupada approved of someone and complimented them, that does not mean that from that point on they are bona fide, no matter what they do. Here are a few examples to further examine this point. One Prabhupada disciple did a huge service for Prabhupada, pushing on the book distribution mission, probably more than any other Prabhupada disciple in ISKCON's history, and was pretty much running ISKCON at one point. But later he changed the basic rules of the 4 regulative principles to 3. Does that mean because he had so many thousands of disciples and at one point was so dear to Srila Prabhupada that Prabhupada even commented on how he was so intelligent and empowered that now we should all only have 3 regulative principles instead of 4 and continue to follow this devotee? There were so many big devotees that Srila Prabhupada personally gave sannyas to, but later on Srila Prabhupada became so fed up with their deviations that he said that they should give up those positions as sannyasi. Srila Prabhupada even said, this should be strictly outlawed, no more sannyasis. There will be no sannyasi anymore. And this is from a room conversation from 77. Srila Prabhupada established the GBC as the ultimate managing authority for all ISKCON. But at one point, Srila Prabhupada totally disbanded the whole of the GBC within ISKCON due to their deviations. So simply because at one point in time Srila Prabhupada appointed them to power and trusted them, does that give them permanent power? No. At any time, anyone can lose their position and power and deviate or go astray, and at that point, one is no longer authorized and empowered. I feel the most relevant example is from the concluding words of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, dated November 10th, 74. Quote, now by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is finished. In this connection, I have to thank my American disciples, especially Sriman Pradyumna Das Adhikari, Sriman Nitai Das Adhikari, Sriman Jadwaita Das Brahmachari, and many other boys and girls who are sincerely helping me in writing, editing, and publishing all these literatures. Unquote. But then, on February in 77, in Mayapur, India, Srila Prabhupada says, Nitai, he's a rascal. Unfortunately, there are so many examples I could mention, but in order to not depress and embarrass all of us unnecessarily in this article, I will stop here. In conclusion, we have shown how the above 2 claims by the BBT International about Jadwaita Swami being good and his work being so-called approved by Prabhupada can be used to justify the changes he has made to Prabhupada's books, and that they can't be used as a guarantee that Jadwaita Swami has not committed mistakes himself or that he has pleased Prabhupada by his work. Unquote. So this was written by Prahlad Nishinga Prabhu. Now we go to the so-called or the quote-unquote closer to Prabhupada argument. This particular argument is flawed in 2 ways. The first flaw It's a rather weird idea that it is good to change a published book back to its earlier draft format without any consultation with the author. Dravida Prabhu has written very nicely about this idea here. Quote, no author intends that the first draft of his book be published. He appoints an editor, and together they work on the book to produce the manuscript, which will ultimately be submitted to the publishers. In this case, Prabhupada wrote the first draft and then worked with Hayagriva and other editors to prepare the manuscript for his Bhagavad-gita as it is, which was ultimately presented to Macmillan and Company for printing. Imagine you write the first draft of a book and appoint an editor. You work with your editor on a daily basis for months until together you produce a manuscript you are happy with and your book is published. Your book becomes a worldwide bestseller and you are very happy with it. It is a spiritual book, and by reading it, many of the readers have life-changing experiences. They also become very attached to your book. Your book is praised by scholars worldwide with rave reviews. Then many years later, after you have left your body, somebody finds the first draft of your book and decides to correct, quote-unquote, or so-called correct your published book based on your first draft. Of course, you were never intending to publish this first draft. That is why you spent so much time and energy working with your editor on that first draft to transform it into a manuscript you actually wanted to present to the publishers. How angry would you be with this fool who wants to undo your work and your editor's work by going back to the first draft? Jayadvaita Swami, by going back to the first draft, is eliminating so many corrections and so much work that Srila Prabhupada personally did on his book with Hayagriva and his other editors. This is a great disservice to Srila Prabhupada. And this is taken from the article Jayadvaita Undoes Prabhupada's Work on Gita Manuscript by Dravida Prabhu. The fact is, by bringing Prabhupada's books closer to their draft is actually bringing them farther away from Prabhupada. But the quote-unquote closer to Prabhupada argument is flawed in an even worse way. It is false. It has survived and spread only because it is based on selective evidence. It is a fact that Jayadvaita Swami in some places has brought the finalized and definitive edition of Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gita as it is closer to its earlier draft form. On their websites, articles, and seminars, Jayadvaita Swami, Dravida Prabhu, and the BBT International have presented these instances in great detail in an attempt to defend their work. But they have purposely left out all the many places where Jayadvaita Swami has made changes which are not traceable back to the earlier drafts. On my blog, here, Arsa-Prayoga.com, I have presented many of these changes. Let us look at some examples. There are about 127 changes made to the word-for-word translations of Prabhupada's Chapter 1 in the Bhagavad-gita as it is. These Sanskrit translations were personally typewritten by Prabhupada. Only 2 of these changes were back to the original manuscript. Hayagriva Prabhu had stayed very loyal to Prabhupada's so-called original manuscript, but Jayadvaita Swami has made extensive corrections to Prabhupada's own personally typewritten Sanskrit translations. I have written about this in the article Tampering with Prabhupada's personally typewritten Sanskrit translations. This article also documents how Jayadvaita Swami is actually misrepresenting the fact about which kinds of changes he made to the editing process. He made in the editing process. On my blog, Arsa-Prayoga.com, I have featured many examples on how Jayadvaita Swami has added new sentences, deleted Prabhupada's own sentences, and rearranged words and sentences in ways that are not traceable to the first drafts. They are not traceable to anything but Jayadvaita Swami's own ideas. On top of that come the deleted foreword, artwork, and front cover. How is that so-called or closer to Prabhupada? How is that closer to Prabhupada? I have written to both the BBT International and Jayadvaita Swami himself about these matters. But so far, after months of waiting, and actually nowadays it's years of waiting, I have not received any answers to my queries. Here are some of the articles containing questions to BBT International and Jayadvaita Swami. So I sent this to them. One is called The Duty of the Finger, One is called Not Back to the Original Manuscript, and one is called Removing Eternal from the Bhagavad-gita as it is, and one is called Lord Ramchandra Removed from the Bhagavad-gita as it is. And these are just a few. Here are more. Actually, I wrote a whole ebook called No Reply from BBTI, containing questions to BBT International, and I never got any answers, from BBT International. So I sincerely hope that Dravida Prabhu will take the time to read this response and all the references given in it, and thereafter return with some clear answers to our questions and concerns. Jadwaita Swami has not replied. Will Dravida Prabhu? No, he will not. It's now 3 years ago, actually, and I still have not received any reply. So thank you very much for watching and listening, and please remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and please remember to share the videos on social media. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.